Buenos días, buenas tardes, y buenas noches, bonjour, bonsoir, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be. J. Slater case. It is Saturday, it is the weekend, it is 22nd of August, and short video, I hope. As far as I know, tomorrow, Jan's Views Live's back on. There's no, on my end, no wine fest planned, or if there is, I'll be able to go to it, come back for the Jazz Views Live, and then go back for the end of the Wine Fest. It's no big deal, but I think we're on. I think we are on for Jazz Views Live tomorrow. Subjects to be discussed, entirely up to Jan, of course. Subject of this video, I just want to touch on the word or the phrase tip-off, because a number of people have been mentioning this, and it is a thorn in the side, I believe, of the accident group argument that a tip-off, and I don't know what you take to that phrase to mean, a tip-off, is used at all in an accident. It does seem very, very strange. To me, a tip-off is when someone gives information about crime or some kind of situation in which they don't want to be involved for a very good reason. They want anonymity because there's a consequence for the world knowing who they are. So I would agree with those that say a tip-off is very much shrouded in mystery because the person giving the tip-off has a very good reason not to be involved in whatever, let's go with crime, but it could be any unusual circumstance. And that doesn't, in my world, that doesn't go with accident. You see, if you and I see an accident in the road and we're the first one to call emergency services, then we're happy to give all the information we possibly can. And if needed, with emergency services, give our name and give our details for any follow-up needed. That's no problem. And I don't think that in the situation of any accident, a normal person would have any hesitancy to say, this is my name and this is, unless you're on the run or there's a very good reason. But in the situation of Tenerife, in the J. Slater case, if this were an accident, we keep saying if it were an accident because otherwise it doesn't make sense, but if it were an accident, who would need anonymity to having witnessed where the body is following an accident? Let's take a likely scenario. Likely scenario is a hiker extraordinaire who managed to get where Jay Slater got to, even though Jay got there in t-shirt, shorts, and trainers. Hiker extraordinaire gets down into that man trap and is happily bumbling along. And from on high, they look down and they see, oh my God, there's a rotting body. At that point, the bumbling hiker is going to contact emergency services and be more than forthcoming about every detail they can possibly give. Because it's an accident, they're not involved. That's not a tip-off. Maybe we're just talking about the wrong word here, but I believe when Sluggy, Crispy, the accident group in general are using tip-off, they mean someone calling anonymously for the reason that they don't want their name involved with what, with an accident? No, not with an accident, with what looks like foul play. That's a reason why you'd give a tip-off. You don't want to be associated with this crime, I would say. So it's always raised our suspicions from day one that the word tip-off was ever used. Like I say, that could be a kind of bumbling mistake from the likes of, Ivor, who isn't very good with his language, with Chris Pennington, who, despite being the managing director of 7 international companies and being an absolute tycoon, man about town, and a general, beautiful communicator, comprador, vendor, despite all that, Chris Pennington's gone with tip-off. You'd thought one of them would correct the other, say, no, it wasn't a tip-off, was it? It was just, alarm raised. Wouldn't you say that about an accident? The alarm was raised by a hiker. And if it wasn't a hiker, and I'll go through this again, this is not a place you hike. It just isn't. It is somewhat dangerous and it leads nowhere. It leads to a beach where there's no boat taking you anywhere. You have to hike all the way back. It's just not a hiker. So, you know, who did actually find Jay Slater? I still don't believe that someone like Chris Pennington would have the balls to call the Guardia Civil and say, even though I've not seen this body, even though I can't smell this body, even though I can't, hand on heart, say 100% sure I know where this body is, I do know where it is and I have found it, and you guys need to go in there, and if you don't, we'll embarrass you tomorrow. I don't think Chris Pennington has the balls, or anyone has the balls, to make that call to Cipriano Martin. To be honest, if that call were ever made to Cipriano Martin, I don't know Cipriano Martin. I have some experience of working with Policía Nacional, Spanish police in general. I think their first reaction would be to think, who is this person calling me, demanding this, saying this? This person needs to be investigated. And if Chris Pennington has any sense about him at all, before he made that call, making his demands and saying he's found a body that he hasn't found, and by the way, this has got to be anonymous, I mean, he just would never do that. I can't imagine anyone would ever do that. They would surely realise, Chris Pennington would realise he's putting himself in grave danger. So where does this whole tip-off thing come from? I think it shows, to be honest, I think it shows the tight corner the accident group have put themselves into, because they can't have it both ways. They can't say, Jay Slater, the body, the alarm was raised by an innocent person who then wanted to just disappear and want nothing to do with it, and there was no mention of why they were there, how they were there, and who they were. I mean, if the alarm was raised, the alarm was raised. It's no big deal. It's no big deal at all. We just, who are you? Why were you there? End of story. But they've backed themselves into this corner because they're saying it was a tip-off, but there's nothing suspicious about the tip-off because it was an accident. Those two things don't go together. I'll say one more time. You witness some kind of accident, you're not going to say, here's a tip-off. That car hit that other car because it was going a little bit too fast. Put the phone down. That's not the real world. So all of you out there saying this word tip-off betrays something other than an accident, I agree. There's one other element to this, and it's the ever-present element with the accident group. When you posit this question, we've got this nutcase Fairfax, whoever Fairfax is, Michael Fairfax, that's commenting on my videos. He's another of these AG stalwarts, even though his account is only 2 weeks old, who cannot answer these very simple questions. When you ask Fairfax, who seems to think he knows all the details of how Jay Slater's body was found, when you ask a simple question like, why a tip-off? What is the person who gave the tip-off hiding? Or who is the person that gave the tip-off? Can you confirm that? We never get an answer. That absence of an answer tells you something's being hidden here. And also, as I say, the very nature of a tip-off tells you there's something more than an accident. I would say. That is not the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about Our Man in Havana, a 1958 novel by Graham Greene, a British novelist, Our Man in Havana, and how it connects to the Jay Slater case. Now, bear with me on this. You might think this is going nowhere, and indeed, this may go nowhere. But one of the books that I taught in my Caribbean literature course was Graham Greene's Our Man in Havana. Not much of a connection to the Caribbean, you might think. Well, it's set in Cuba, obviously, Havana, but the author is British, and it was curious for our class to see how Cuba, back in the Fulgencio Batista regime, pre-Castro, how things worked, and that expat community, what it was like. So in Our Man in Havana, one of the alarming things that pops out is that the protagonist of the novel is a man called Wormold, Jim Wormold, Wormold. I mean, just in the name, we're not that far off Sluggy, are we? Wormold, Sluggy, the worm, the slug. Well, Jim Wormold is this British expat living in Cuba. He makes a living just by selling vacuum cleaners and vacuum cleaner parts, but he needs money, and he finds an extra source of income is working for MI6 as effectively an agent, spy, if you like. The only problem is in Sluggy's life, sorry, Wormold's life, is that even though he needs some more income and MI6 is going to be the source of that income, he's going to be our man in Havana, Wormold's got nothing to tell anyone. He's got no insights. He doesn't have any links to any great underworld connection or Cold War activity. Poor old Wormold in Havana, he knows nothing. He knows no one. He's got nothing to say. So what do you do in that situation when you're Sluggy? I mean Wormold, and you feel you have to justify this role you've been put in, but you've got nothing to say. Well, what you do and what Wormold does, what Wormold did was he started making stuff up to justify his role as our man in Havana. So he supplied some names of people he thought were involved in enemy activity. Names, some of them were fictitious. He just made them up. Some of them were from, I think, some expat club he belonged to. Don't hold me to every detail on this. It's been a long time since I taught a class, Our Man in Havana. So all the accident group are out there saying, oh, he's lying, he's making it up, he got a detail wrong, he doesn't know, he's ignorant. I'm just saying, if I make a mistake, it's because I haven't looked at the book for a while. But I can give you the gist of it, and the gist is kind of interesting. So our man in Havana, he's got no information to give. He likes getting his MI6 salary, but he feels he has to justify his existence. I mean, if he's going to send in regular reports, he has to say something. So he makes up a few names. He starts fabricating. Enemy person this, Raoul, who I suspect, da 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 da. Then he goes further. He starts sending in some drawings, designs of what he believes is an enemy. What is it? It's like a munitions factory or some kind of missile defense installation. I don't know. You can imagine late 50s is at the time when there was a lot of interest in Cuba. Cuba Missile Crisis is just around the corner. But anyway, the point is that all this fabrication seems fine, absolutely fine in the beginning to Sluggy, to Wormold, because what can come of it? He's just making fibbing a little bit, creating a few things from his imagination to keep his bosses at MI6 in London happy. Problem is, MI6 takes his information seriously. They believe every word is true. And they start looking into it. And not only that, there's a leak that gets out into Cuban society that this information is being passed on. Now, all of a sudden, Wormold has made an enemy of himself to people that live around him. People are now questioning him, questioning his word. What is his role in life? What is he up to? What are his aims? All of a sudden, my point is here, I'll cut to the chase, is in the innocence of trying to please someone with manufactured information, Wormold, in fact, creates a horrific situation where others become spied upon, tracked. I think there's even a death. And Wormold himself becomes in great danger, all because of a few porky pies that were told just to keep a boss happy. Now, what I want to think about is it possible the likes of Sluggy and Chris in the J. Slater case were in exactly the same situation? Let us assume, for the sake of argument, that Sluggy having two boats, both called the Naughty Boy, really doesn't mean anything. That Sluggy, since he retired from his oil rig work, has been totally innocent, not involved in anything, a kind of Jim Wormold type, a little bit hard up for cash, might need a little bit of extra income, but an innocent guy. Would he be tempted into some kind of, I don't know, role to earn a little something, make a name for himself, possibly even come out of it as a hero? Would he be tempted by that? In other words, is it the case, is it possible that both Pennington and Lovelace got into this case for fairly innocent motives, you know, just to appear to be doing something good, just to appear to get some income? I mean, we don't know. We assume Chris Pennington is, I don't, with cash aplenty, a rich guy, man about town, got plenty to splash out. And yet we don't know that. I mean, the very wealthiest of people are extremely wealthy until the day they declare bankruptcy and have nothing. We don't know the finances of any of the people involved in the Jay Slater case. To be honest, we don't know the finances of anyone on the planet apart from the likes of Elon Musk. But again, if Tesla collapses, Elon Musk ain't the richest guy in the world. So let us assume that Pennington and Lovelace, innocent characters, a little bit hard up for cash, and they are tempted, just as Wormold was tempted by MI6, to give a little bit of information, do a little bit of research, come up with some ideas. The problem is, the more they got into it, the more they thought they could get out of it. And the more they got into it, and the more they thought they could get out of it, the more of a mess they created when our man in Havana, Wormold, started fabricating stuff, but realizing there are consequences to doing that. Is it possible that the cover-up that is going on is just the cover-up, not necessarily of a crime? We're talking specifically about El Slugtardo and the pumpkin. Slugtardo and the pumpkin. Is it possible they joined forces with a rather naive and gullible Adrian to appear to be doing something because they felt that's what they had to do, for whatever reason, because their relatively empty lives demanded of them that they insert themselves in this role, but they actually had nothing to do with the beginning of it, Jay Slater arriving in Tenerife and, spending some time in the narco underworld, and the end of it, his death. There are a number of people that get involved in all kinds of things innocently. They then become corrupted. They can't get out of it. And you'll see in the behavior, not wishing to be psychoanalyst here, but you can see in the behavior of Chris Pennington this frustration over and over and over again. That all he wants the world to see him as this good Samaritan that stepped in to help a needy family, a family in need. That's all he wanted to be, I believe, possibly. But the shite that hit the fan, because Chris got so far involved, so deep involved, all of those questions on Alive and that bullying behavior of Francesca and all the rest of them, he made it so that he became the story, not just a good Samaritan in the story. I'm kind of doing these two a favor right now. I'm saying, is it possible that at the heart of the Jay Slater case, Pumpkin and Slugtardo are pretty much innocent, but they made themselves appear terribly guilty by fabricating a whole lot of stuff, which they then can't defend and answer, and then shedding the light of suspicion right on them? I suspect the conspiratorial element that follow this channel will say, obviously not. There's a lot more to it than them getting involved, telling a few fibs, and then getting kind of caught up in a cover-up. They are, I think the suspicion is they are guilty of a crime. Our man in Havana, Graham Greene, an innocent guy that ends up causing all kinds of mayhem just because he couldn't keep his mouth shut and had to start fabricating stuff to make his role look plausible. Is that what we're dealing with? With our heroic and daredevil searchers and rescuers there? Is that all it is from their standpoint? I don't know. Let's leave it there. Hasta luego. Adios. Hasta la vista. See you next time.